So I think in a more digital, like today we live in such a digitized world that data and the meaning of it can get quite abstracted from like what is actually happening in the world that is generating that. And even when we think about things like markets, it's so easy to forget that there's a real economy behind that.
Yes, and the economy is impacting real people.
Yes, and even the way we use the word economy, like, often we talk about a society as an economy.
Yes.
So we'll say the economy of, or, like, it's quite bizarre.
It is.
Because it's not an economy.
Yeah,
it's not an economy first and foremost.
Yeah.
It's a society first and foremost.
Yeah.
Many things going on in that society. Cultural things, religious things, productive things, familial things, and then we abstract from that and see it as an economy and what are the economic dynamics, and then abstract even more and talk about equity markets and
exactly. You oversimplify actually the complexity of what's going on and the factors that are actually impacting that system.
Yes. So I've been very fortunate all along to have these reminders, I think, of what sits behind things. So as I knew that there was the superpower that actuaries bring would be amplified by working with other disciplines. That we could do more and that we could get into some of the wicked problems, the like really...
Explain that term to us. I know what it means. That I love learning about this. So please tell our audience what a wicked problem is.
So a wicked problem is a problem that it's complex, there's ambiguity and uncertainty. It's a problem that you can't neatly summarize and simplify. And it's very much how the real world actually works. Things are interconnected. If you fix one piece of something, it has ripple effects through to something else. The wicked problems are often the problems that seem intractable. That we don't know where to even enter into the problem. So I've always been attracted to those.
And
then realizing that with the transdisciplinarity, that we could actually begin to think about things that people were shying away from. So, for example, I'll give you an example. So, we've done lots of work over the years in the questions relating to what's called HRH, or Human Resources for Health. But it's really about, like, okay, so how many doctors and nurses and surgeons and home carers and community workers and pharmacists do you need for a healthcare system to function? It's a very interesting kind of sets of mathematical problems, but actually quite actuarial in the sense of, you have populations where there are entry rates, so then exit rates, and multiple decrements, so people retiring and dying and immigrating and so very sort of actuarial from that perspective. But you need to understand a lot of things about the burden of disease. You need to understand a lot of demographic factors, like what is going on in the population. You need to understand the resource constraints. So
socioeconomic.
Absolutely. So the way, for example, an obstetric team to deliver a baby in Malawi is constructed, in rural Malawi, is very different to how a team is constructed in the private sector in Singapore, for example.
Very different.
Very different. And you need to actually have some clinical understanding to understand, like, how do those different team structures translate into outcomes? So can you allocate resources in a way that you still get good outcomes, but you're acting within the resource envelope that you have? So when we did that work, we had an economist, we had somebody who worked in public health, we had clinicians, so realizing actually that you need this interplay of skills.
Which makes intuitive sense in the sense that if something is multifaceted, having a multidisciplinary view, like the logic seems seamless there, but I guess we do try siloed problems.
And I think one of the problems the actuarial profession has had globally is a kind of arrogance around the skill set, and that's fueled. It is fueled a little bit by capitalist forces and how markets work. So there's an overvaluing of actuarial skills.
It's supply and demand element. Because there's so few actuaries.
And it's an onerous path to get there. So you inevitably end up with a relatively small pool of people, and then that small pool of people gets overvalued. And as human beings, we confuse money with self-worth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we think
my potential to earn is my actual worth as a human being because I can put a number to it.
But it absolutely isn't.
Yeah.
And it's that belief that leads to all sorts of incorrect intuitions on things like how we think about poverty and poverty alleviation, how we think about inequality, how we think about a universal basic income, for example.
Yeah.
At a talk last night with the Nobel laureate who's done the work on universal basic income.
Sure.
And it's startling how much research has been scientific research has been needed to convince people that poor people won't waste a grant or won't waste.
Yeah, there's these underlying bias that come up.
Because
but you actually need to research that. There needs to be rigor there because you can't just assume that a certain scenario will happen. You need to play this out, which is actually an actuarial concept, like with scenario analysis, sensitivity testing.
Yes.
So it's not something we're unfamiliar with, but I think when it challenges our bias, then I think we're like, oh, no, we're not going to apply that logic because the bias is there. And so that's something I think as actuaries or wanting to be a good actuary, you have to challenge all the time.
Absolutely. And so I think this like fundamental idea that money reflects self-worth is a critical one for actuaries to engage with internally.
Yeah.
So it's personal work, right? To make sure that your sense of self-worth, but then also how you look at other people and how you look at the world, to keep reminding yourself actually that there's an essential worthiness that everybody has.
Yeah.
Because not believing that leads to all kinds of really dangerous things.
And
one of the dangerous things is the arrogance that somehow actuaries know more than other people, or don't need other disciplines, can figure things out themselves. And I mean, I see this in the climate space, for example, where people in the profession who are sort of upskilling in relation to climate change are doing it just with other actuaries. So getting into a room and talking about it with other actuaries.
He said, let's go talk with a climatologist.
Talk to climate scientists, talk to people who run organizations on like NGOs on the ground. Actually having to deal with
the ramifications.
What is the lived experience of people grappling with floods, with hurricanes? And I mean, an interesting example of that that I came across this morning was reading about the Florida insurance market, household insurance market, and basically how, because of the increase in hurricanes, the insurers have pulled out.
It becomes uninsurable. Well, they've deemed it
uninsurable. And, so instead of us thinking about, gosh, this is having real compassion for the people on the ground losing their homes, and the recognition that this is going to happen all over the world.
100%.
How do, using our brilliant minds to think about how do we solve this problem? How do we reallocate capital? It's so easy for us to lose that connection to the people on the ground and the suffering on the ground and make purely commercial decisions to say, and I'm not saying people shouldn't do things at a loss. I'm just saying surely with our...
But just because there is a possibility of a loss doesn't mean that other alternatives shouldn't be explored. And I think that's something I constantly say to my students when I'm teaching them, is I'm saying actuaries don't only play out in one space. Like, you're building a skill set that you can apply in innumerable spaces. Don't see yourself as just an insurance specialist, because then you're actually cutting off a whole world of possibility for yourself. But that's also something I think you have to have courage to pursue, because it's going to be an area of learning, which I'm sure you can attest to, that you constantly have to learn, where you'd have to apply your skills in places where there wasn't a blueprint, and you have to be comfortable with that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, there's a stretch involved in that, which is both delicious,
delicious.
To learn new things, but yes, absolutely, the learning curve continues. But it is, I think that I think it's a powerful set of tools. But it needs to be combined with an awareness of the real world and an awareness of interconnectedness, awareness of how, we relate to each other as human beings, how we relate to the earth. So that, and how we relate to other disciplines, So I think it is really important personal work. And often I understand why it happens, because I also suffered the impact of a difficult qualification journey.
Yeah.
You make a lot.
Just get all your exemptions first time, qualified at 23 kind of thing, yeah.
No, so it is, you sacrifice a lot. There's a lot that goes into passing 15 board exams.
Yeah.
So then I think it's easy to feel like, oh, well, I've worked so hard, and now I deserve my big salary.
Exactly.
And actually as a defense against the kind of vulnerability of that journey, to kind of separate yourself from other people.
Yeah.
So so back to the transdisciplinarity, just really strongly believe in that, that actuaries need more and more to really work on meaningful, complex problems and really to unleash the full power of the training.
Yeah.
Need to embrace and actually have the humility to ask other people how they see the world.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting in that is that I think there's also like an underpin in that you must try and pursue work that you find meaningful. And I think often people are like, oh no, I built this actuarial skill set. I'm sorted money-wise. It doesn't matter what work I do because I'm sorted money-wise.
Yes, and actually I think not even saying that you build yourself a cage.
Yeah, so, it might be in it. It's a comfortable cage, but
it's a comfortable cage, but it is a cage because you limit what you can see, what the opportunities are, what the various ways in which are that you could use your skills.
Yeah.
Because I guess the money and financial security is...
Which I understand. I'm not negating that need, but there is more to it than just financial security.
There is. Because money is definitely one of the things that separates us as human beings. It becomes harder and harder the more involved you become with financial security. The less easy it is to really understand everybody else's lived experience. Because it is, the actuaries and what they earn places you in a country like South Africa, not just in the top 1%, but in the sort of 0.1%.
Top tier.
Yeah, which can be, not always. People find a variety of ways to remain connected, but it can disconnect you from the lived experience of the vast majority of other people. So then we have to actively work to keep that connection going.
Yeah.
And make sure that it can sort of be like a trick mirror hall, You're seeing the distorted images and you forget after a little while that those are distorted images.
Yeah.
And then there are questions of like, okay, so then how do you design a product that
is for a people group that you actually don't understand at all?
Yes.
Yes. And you're designing it with your sort of communication structure and your understanding of a healthcare system in mind. But, you put a network of GPs and you're like, they could just view the network of GPs and they've never been to a private GP before.
Absolutely.
So they don't even know how to engage in that format. And you just don't understand that because you haven't thought outside your bubble.
So one of the great gifts of the last 6 years is in building our transdisciplinary team at Percept. We've worked with anthropologists, with
incredible.
Sociologists, with historians. So working with a wide range of disciplines, but particularly that anthropological way of engaging with the world.
Yeah.
Which is like, why don't we just ask people, or why don't we observe?
What do you want?
So one of the areas I've worked in literally like from day one of my career. So when I worked for Heather, one of the questions we were engaging with was around affordability and low cost health cover,
which will always be relevant.
Remains a very fraught area. But only in the last kind of 2 years, worked with the anthropologist on our team, and we had a client that wanted to understand the stories of the people needing these products.
Sure.
Like, okay, yes, we have an intuition that these products are needed, but there's a free public sector, right? So who are the people who don't access the free public sector and are willing to, despite the fact that they don't have a lot of money, actually pay for a private health insurance product? And what is going on there?
Exactly.
And it was, I'd been working in this area for more than 20 years and had never really had the opportunity to engage with that question.
Sure.
And it was fascinating, to understand, like, okay, yes, it's the young woman working at a call center who needs contraception. And actually, she doesn't get enough leave.
Yeah, she can't go stand in a queue at a clinic,
yes,
hoping that she'll get her contraceptive that day.
Yes.
Actually stands there the whole day, doesn't get the contraceptive, and that was her one day off.
Yes. And also can't risk a break in contraception, right? So she's sexually active.
100%.
She really doesn't want a kid right now. She's trying to build a career. So there are all of those that, there's her story.